Well, we are through with the regular season in the 2023 high school football season. That's hard to believe that we've made it through 11 straight weeks in the blink of an eye, but here we are. A lot was on the line this week between region championships to be decided as well as playoff seedings. Let's get started with the most important game that happened this week, the city rivalry between the Spartanburg Vikings and Dorman Cavaliers. Annual tussle between these two rivals with always has something on the line. This year, the stakes, some may argue, were not as high as they were back in 2021 when these two got together with the region championship on the line. But really, there was a lot riding on this one because it could have been the difference between third place and being the at large bid out of Region 2 5A or the at large bid in the upper state period in 5A. And Spartanburg win set up a three-way tie scenario between Boiling Springs, Spartanburg, and Dormond, where it would depend on the point differential at the end of the third quarter, head to head between those three. Or a Dorman win would have locked in Dorman as a 3 seed, Boiling Springs as a 4, and Spartanburg having to be the at large bid in this one. And when you look at the matchup on paper coming in, it looked like it was going to be a defensive slugfest because Spartanburg, yeah, they've had question marks on offense all season long. Their offensive line has struggled all season long. They didn't have TJ Johnson as he had to sit out another week. He's been injured. So they had to go with their sophomore, Trey Burke, in his second start. He's only 15 years old as a sophomore. And it's with Dorman almost the exact same. Both of these two teams, the strength of the team's been the defense all season long. It's been the secondary for Dorman. It's been Spartanburg's linebackers in particular. And it's just been a year where neither team has been strong on the offensive side of the ball. So on paper, it looked like this was going to be a defensive slugfest, kind of like what we thought was going to happen between Boiling Springs and Spartanburg last week, where it was going to probably come down to a late field goal, be a 6-3 kind of final. But luckily, paper is not always the way things play out. Scissors beats paper, so to speak. And it couldn't have come in a better way for Spartanburg this week. Spoiler alert: Spartanburg did get the win in this one. They beat Dorman 35-14, and they did it doing it with something that they haven't done all year. They had a rhythm on offense, and they jumped out to a 21-0 lead unanswered. And not only did they did that, they hung 35 points. They're the most they scored all season long, and they had 418 yards of total offense in the process, and it was fairly balanced. They had 215 through the air, 203 through the air, 215 on the ground. So just a big credit there to Trey Burke. Again, he's a sophomore, but he went 15 for 20 with a passing touchdown against that Dorman secondary. That's pretty impressive there. And Dorman sticking with Bryce O'Neill as their quarterback again. O'Neill attempted 46 passes. He was 32 of 46 at 2 touchdowns. His bugaboo is he threw 2 interceptions, one of which was a pick six that basically sealed the game late. But Spartanburg again jumps out to a 21-0 lead. Dorman finally cracks the scoreboard with 5 minutes 22 seconds to play in the third quarter. And even though they pulled within a score, Spartanburg managed to score the next 14 unanswered to put it away. Trenton Lynch had a 78-yard touchdown run. Big night for Trenton Lynch, by the way. He was the key player for Spartanburg in this one. He had 171 yards and a pair of touchdowns on 14 carries. Trey Harris also had a nice game, 43 yards and a touchdown on 7 carries. And the lone receiving touchdown of the game went to Justin Rice as he hauled in 5 passes for 83 yards to lead the way to the air for the Vikings. But at the end of the day, Spartanburg's defense did what they were supposed to do, and they limited Dorman until the third quarter, and ultimately Spartanburg's defense is what ended up putting it away. They had that pick six late, and that pretty much sealed it. So credit to Spartanburg. They found something on offense at a really good time because what better time than not only beating your rival but also going into the playoffs the very next week to finally kind of find something on offense. And you may say, yeah, it was against a very bad Dorman team, like the worst Dorman team in 33 years. Well, but I just said a few minutes ago, this Dorman team, the strength of their team is their defense, especially their secondary. And Spartanburg managed to find a way to pass effectively against them. And so, they had 203 yards through the air against that secondary. And not only that, but they were able to run for 215. That's something, especially when you got a sophomore back there in the backfield, quarterback. And so, big credit to Spartanburg. They did find something at just the right time. They beat Dorman 35-14. And that does set up the three-way tiebreaker scenario. By point differential at the end of the third quarter, Boiling Springs was leading Dorman by 3 at the end of the third quarter, and they were leading Spartanburg by, I think, 7 at the end of the third quarter. So that set up Boiling Springs to be locked in as the 3 seed out of Region 2 5A. Spartanburg gets the 4, and then Dorman finishes 5th. But the good news for Dorman is you're still going to be in the playoffs as you were locked in as the at-large bid out of the upper state. So all the entire region in Region 2 5A made it into the playoffs. For Spartanburg, they will have to go on the road to Rock Hill, and they will have to play on Thursday. Reason being for that is Northwestern and Rock Hill share a stadium. Northwestern also got a home. Northwestern actually got home field advantage. They're the best team in 4A really in the state, but they won their region. Rock Hill finished second in their region behind Clover, so Rock Hill gets 2 home games there. Northwestern has home field advantage throughout. Flip of the coin, Northwestern ends up getting the Friday night game, and Rock Hill plays on Thursday. So Spartanburg will have to go on the road. It'll be a tough test against a really good Rock Hill team, but nonetheless, you got to be feeling pretty confident about yourself right now if you're Spartanburg. And hopefully, you got to feel like you maybe can get hot at just the right time here, which obviously helps in the playoffs considerably. So best of luck for Spartanburg moving forward as they go to Rock Hill on Thursday. Dorman will get a rematch with the Burns Rebels at Nixon Field, a game that came down to the wire a couple of weeks ago there. So good luck to both of those two squads. Speaking of Burns, with the Region 2 5A championship on the line, it came down to another big rivalry game, and there's absolutely no love lost between these two. When Burns and Gaffney get together, the Burns Rebels and Gaffney Indians, especially when they play each other at the reservation, whether that been the old WK Brumbox Stadium, which most of us still call the reservation just because, we're old. Yeah, the new reservation's a wonderful facility, but it just kind of lacks the same feeling of nostalgia that you got and fear that the old reservation struck in people. But nonetheless, it's always heated, even when they get together in the new reservation. So, big battle between Burns and Gaffney with the region championship on the line. Despite the hype in this one, though, it very nearly turned out to be a lopsided blowout. I mean, Gaffney turned the ball over 5 times in this game, and Burns took full well advantage of it. Burns took a 17-0 lead going into the half, went up 24-0 early in the third quarter. It looked like they were going to shut Gaffney out from there, and they had that stadium drop a pin a mile away, kind of quiet. You could hear it. But Gaffney there in the fourth quarter mounts a furious rally. They outscored Burns 21-3 down the stretch, and with about just under 5 minutes to play in the game, Burns actually fumbles the ball, sets Gaffney up around midfield with a chance to take the lead, but credit to Burns' defense. They did what they've been doing all year long. They forced a 3 and out. And then on the very next play, Burns swings the momentum back for good as Andrew Stevens dumps it off to Armani Weaver. Weaver breaks loose, goes for a 72-yard touchdown to basically salted it away. And Jade McDowell scores late for Gaffney, but it was just too little too late as Burns goes on to the 33-21 win over the Indians. And that locks up the region championship for the Burns Rebels. Gaffney locked in as a 2 seed. So Burns, as a region champ, again has home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and they will take on Dorman next week. Dorman, the at-large bid for 5A Upper State. Gaffney has a tough test as they will host the Lexington Wildcats next week. And looking at the bracket, Boiling Springs is on a bye this week, but they locked up the 3 seed again via the tiebreaker scenario with Spartanburg beating Dorman. So Boiling Springs will go on the road. They'll have a tough test against the Dutch Fork Silver Foxes next week. Dutch Fork playing a lot better than they were early in the season when they started off like 0-4. Boiling Springs has had a bye week, so they'll be a little bit more rested, but there's still some question marks with Boiling Springs as far as injuries and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. You got a resurgent team there from Dutch Fork, and then you got Boiling Springs, who it's really going to probably come down to how it starts out for them here. But I'll be covering that one next week down at Dutch Fork. Kind of excited about that. Best of luck to Boiling Springs. Looking at the 5A bracket real quick. The winner of Dutch Fork Boiling Springs will take on the winner of TL Hanna Fort Mill in round 2. Meanwhile, the winner of Gaffney versus Lexington will take on the winner of Clover versus Woodmont in round number 2. Rock Hill Spartanburg winner will take on the winner of JL Man Blythewood. The winner from Rock Hill Spartanburg will have the home field advantage in that one. The winner of Burns versus Dorman will take on the winner of Nation Ford versus Hillcrest in round 2. So there's your 5A Upper State bracket. moving on into 4A, and this is the game that I was at Friday night. The battle for the Golden Spike between the Greer Yellow Jackets and the Riverside Warriors. This is the second annual battle for the Golden Spike. They just started playing for this trophy last year. Greer won it last year, and well, even though this ain't your daddy's Riverside, this ain't the Riverside that was everybody's homecoming a few years ago. They're a much resurgent program, and credit to Matthew Rochester on that. He's done a fantastic job of building them up to be competitive, but right now they're really young, and they were just outmatched in this one by Greer. Greer's got athletes up and down the board, and well, Greer gets to keep the Golden Spike for a second year as they beat Riverside 42-21. And contrary to what that score would lead you to believe, it really wasn't close for a lot of the game. Greer had a 28-7 lead at the half. It looked like it was going to be a runaway blowout. Riverside, though, again, they even though they're young, they got some nice playmakers. They've got their sophomore or their junior quarterback with a nice ability to sling it downfield and extend plays with his legs, and Jacob Medlin. They got some speedy playmakers at receiver with their sophomore Jaden Taylor, junior Michael Skinner, and another junior in Israel Lehman. But while they've got some nice pieces, they were just outmatched in this game, and that was kind of evident from square one. Chase Bird ran the opening kickoff back 96 yards. Looked like that was going to set the tone there. That got called back for a hold, but the very next play, Greer scored either way. Thanks to Chris Hall, 10-yard quarterback keeper. Then Greer forces a quick 3-and-out on Riverside's first series. Greer takes a 14-0 lead. They marched 82 yards in that series, capped by a LaDainian Martin touchdown. It was just a LaDainian Martin and Chris Hall show. And Riverside had some nice plays where they were able to make some big plays. Yeah, that quarterback again, he's got the ability to keep plays alive and find guys, but they also get these speedy receivers that can be a little bit elusive. They had a couple of lucky plays where he just had one where he heaved it down the sideline, and he had one of his two receivers there in triple coverage, and somehow with his speed, he just managed to basically make one quick little move that shook off the safety, and he got in behind him and went for a long touchdown that made it a two-score game at that point. There was another one where it was their first series of the second half after it was 28-7 going into the half, where again that quarterback kind of rolled around, found a guy open along the side near sideline. He just kind of threw it as it was going out of bounds, and he just happened to find the guy. The guy was already in double coverage and managed to juke his way out of it and run all the way back across the field and then go down the opposite sideline for a touchdown. So you take away those two lucky plays, and really this was a runaway blowout. But that's not to say that Riverside didn't play well. They had a couple of series where they turned it over on downs on the opposite side of the 50. They get inside the red zone, and this situation where you're down multiple scores, it was 4-down territory, and Greer kept getting stops. But at the end of the day, LaDainian Martin and Chris Hall just completely outmatched Riverside. I mean, LaDainian Martin and Chris Hall, 38 combined rushing attempts between them. Chris Hall had 159 rushing yards. Martin had 131. Both of them had 2 touchdowns apiece. The backup running back, Nick Holmes, he had to come in late in the game because LaDainian Martin actually got hurt. I don't know the extent of the injury. I know Martin was able to walk off on his own power, but really slowly, and basically he was walking on the balls of his heels as he was going off the field. So I don't know what that means for him. Hopefully he'll be able to come back. But if not, it's not necessarily detrimental to Greer because they've got athletes up and down the roster. You got Chris Hall, you got Nick Holmes, but you got Brock Diggins, you got Chase Bird, you've got all these big pieces that have been contributing for them all season long. And credit to Greer, we talked about their schedule and how they played such a brutal non-region schedule. Then when they got out of region play, they entered region play winless and then ran the table down the stretch. And that's because they played such a tough non-region schedule. They've always had these nice pieces here. They were competitive, but they just played a tough non-region schedule, and it paid off dividends for them. So they got into this region that they should win, and they did. So Greer again gets the 42-21 win over Riverside. That really wasn't as close as it looked. And Greer will host Indianland in the first round of the playoffs this coming Friday. They will if they move on into the second round, they will take on the winner of Greenville versus South Aiken. So best of luck to the Greer Yellow Jackets, the Region 2 4A champion. Now on the 3A side of things, this is besides the Spartanburg Dorman game and besides the hype behind Gaffney Burns, there was also this one, which was a game that from really the preseason, everybody was saying circle. Actually, we've really been circling it on the calendar ever since the region realignment was done, and these two were determined to be the two best teams in this region, Chapman and Broome. We've been saying it all season that the region championship would come down between them, and it did, and this game lived up to the hype and then some. It wasn't a whole lot of passing to be found in this game. It was all about the run game, but nonetheless, yeah, something about Chapman coming into the season, we said that if Chapman was going to be competitive this year, they would have to check a couple of boxes. One, beat Clinton. If you can do that, that says that you're pretty good. They did beat Clinton, and their defense did really well in that game late when they needed to. Coleman Gray stepped up and did a good job when he needed to in order to take the team on his back. Beat Broome. If they can beat Broome, then it also shows that they got and they were able to do both. Chapman got the 38-35 win in this one. Go ahead and break that news, but it didn't come easily for them. I mean, Matthias Scott ran for 3 touchdowns in this game. Chapman's offense was rolling just the same as it always has, but Broome just didn't lay back, and Broome's been competitive all season long. They've been hanging like 400 to 500 yards of total offense every game, and a lot of it has to do with Jalen McGill. And Jalen McGill just took the team on his back, did everything he could in this one. So, I mean, it was basically early on just trading long drives. I mean, Chapman would answer Broome with like 70-plus yard drives. It would take 5-6 plays apiece. And on the Broome side of things, it would just be a whole lot of Jalen McGill. Jalen McGill had a kickoff return touchdown. He had 3 rushing touchdowns to go with that. Let's see what his actual numbers were here. Yeah, he had 22 rushes for 155 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. That's a pretty typical line for Jalen McGill to go along with that kickoff return touchdown. So 4 total touchdowns in this one. Kamaje Brackett Brannon, who has also been part of the bread and butter of that offense, he logged 112 rushing yards on 13 attempts of the touchdown himself. He only threw it 7 times, and he just completed 2 of those for 14 yards. So it was a big battle of the running backs here between Jalen McGill and Matthias Scott. But in the end, it was Coleman Gray and Matthias Scott that were the keys. Gray just had 1 incompletion. He was 12 for 13 for 124 yards, ran the ball 15 times for 132 with 2 touchdowns. And Matthias Scott, he logged 176 rushing yards on 20 carries with 3 touchdowns. He had 2 receptions for 13 yards. Keanu Na also contributed. He was over the century mark with 101 yards on 12 carries. And so Chapman just ran the ball really effectively. And in the end, they just made one more play that Broome didn't. Chapman pulled away with a late field goal by Jackson Vissery, and that was the difference in the game. But that wouldn't have happened without the contributions of Matthias Scott and Coleman Gray. So at the end of the day, Chapman checks off a box here. And if you're Broome, even though you finished second in the region, you're not necessarily thinking that this is detriment. I mean, both of these two teams are capable of making a deep run of the playoffs, and both of them may very well. I mean, let's look at the bracket here. Going ahead, Chapman's going to host Crescent in the opening round. Broome's going to host Seneca, so it's definitely not an easy draw, especially on Broome's side. But, I mean, if Chapman beats Crescent, which they should, then they'll take on the winner of Chester versus Powdersville. On the other side of the bracket, no, Broome obviously is not playing Powdersville in the first round, which seems to be an established trend over the last few years. They'll be taking on Seneca, and then if they get past Seneca, who is the number 3 seed out of Region 1, then they will take on the winner of Clinton versus Palmetto. So obviously Chapman has the easier road there to make it to the Upper State Championship, because Broome's road runs through Clinton, and Chapman, if you're Chapman, you got to feel pretty confident that if you end up meeting Clinton later on down the road, you've already beaten them once. And so you got to feel pretty confident that you could probably do it again. And so, both of these two teams, very good teams, very capable teams. We'll see how it goes for them. Best of luck as they go forward into 3A playoffs. The only team locally that did not make the playoffs is Union County. They lost to Woodruff. Union hung over 40 points again, but again, their defense has been terrible this season, and they ended up giving up 50-plus points again. So Woodruff beats them handily. Woodruff in the first round will go on the road to Wren, and if they are able to get past Wren, they'll take on the winner of Daniel versus Blue Ridge in the second round. So best of luck to all of our teams in 3A that are in the playoffs. On the 2A side of things, Liberty ends up scoring with about 5 seconds left on the clock to beat Chesney. A game where Chesney was out to a pretty sizable lead. I think they were up 27-0 at one point in this game and just let it get away. So heartbreak there for Chesney, but Chesney still locks up the 4 seed out of Region 1 2A, and they will go on the road next week to Batesburg, Leesville. Landrum finally gets a region wins. They knock off Blacksburg 44-7. Big day there from, stop me if you've heard this before, Colton Link. Colton Link had, I think, 4 touchdowns in this game, and that was kind of the difference, a big difference maker as Landrum gets a 44-7 win. But Landrum, they will go on the road to take on Strom Thurmond in the first round of the playoffs. Landrum locks up the 5 seed out of Region 1 2A. Looking at the 2A bracket here, Landrum will take on Strom Thurmond, and if they should get past the Rebels, which is going to be a tough task for them on the road, and they will have to take on the winner of 96 versus Keenan. And dependent upon who gets the win there in that second part of the bracket there between 96 and Keenan, probably 96. If Landrum were to beat Strom Thurmond, 96 would be the home team in that one. If not, if Strom Thurmond beats Landrum, obviously this is a moot talking point. Strom Thurmond would end up hosting the winner of 96 and Keenan. But good luck to Landrum moving forward there. Chesney, again, goes to Batesburg, Leesville. The winner of Chesney, Batesburg, Leesville will take on the winner of Pillion versus Gray Collegiate. So, Gray Collegiate. But best of luck to those two as they try to make a run here in the 2A Upper State Playoff bracket. Obviously, the heavy favorite will be Gray Collegiate looking forward here, but don't count out Abbeville. They can pull it. All right, that will do it for the regular season for the 2023 high school football season. We'll now look ahead to the playoffs. Again, good luck to each of our local teams that have made it. 10 out of the 11 are in. We'll see how many are still standing after round 1 this coming week.